Welcome to Deep Into Finance family. We appreciate you being here with us. Give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Share with your friends and family and stay up to date to our future videos. The national debt of the United States is one of the most significant economic issues that the country is facing today. As of 2021, the debt has surpassed $28 trillion, making it the largest debt in the world. The debt has been growing steadily since the 1970s, and there are a variety of factors that have contributed to this trend. In this essay, we will explore the history of the national debt, the causes of its growth, and the potential consequences of such a high level of debt. History of the national debt. The national debt of the United States has been a part of the country's economic landscape since its inception. The first significant debt was incurred during the Revolutionary War when the Continental Congress authorized the issuance of paper currency to fund the war effort. By the end of the war, the United States had accumulated $27 million in debt. In the early years of the country, the national debt was relatively small, and it was primarily used to finance wars. However, in the 20th century, the national debt began to grow rapidly due to a combination of factors, including the Great Depression, World War II, and increased government spending on social programs. By the end of World War II, the national debt had grown to $260 billion, which was equivalent to 121% of the country's gross domestic product (GDP). Throughout the second half of the 20th century, the national debt continued to grow, but at a slower pace. However, in the 21st century, the debt has been growing rapidly once again, largely due to the aftermath of the Great Recession and the COVID-19 pandemic. Causes of the national debt. There are several factors that have contributed to the growth of the national debt over the years. Some of the most significant causes include wars. Throughout the country's history, wars have been one of the primary drivers of the national debt. Wars are expensive, and the government has typically relied on borrowing to finance them. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have all contributed to the national debt. Economic downturns. Economic downturns can also contribute to the national debt. During times of recession, the government may increase spending on social programs and infrastructure projects to stimulate the economy. However, this increased spending often leads to higher deficits and debt. Social programs, such as Social Security and Medicare, have also contributed to the national debt. These programs are popular among Americans, but they are expensive to maintain. As the population ages and more people become eligible for these programs, their cost will continue to rise. Tax cuts. Tax cuts can also contribute to the national debt. When the government reduces taxes, it typically results in lower revenue. If spending is not reduced at the same time, this can lead to higher deficits and debt. Interest on the debt. Finally, interest on the debt can contribute to its growth. When the government borrows money, it must pay interest on that debt. As the debt grows, the amount of interest that the government must pay also grows. In 2021, the government paid over $360 billion in interest on the debt. Consequences of the national debt. The national debt has several potential consequences, including reduced economic growth. High levels of debt can reduce economic growth by increasing interest rates and crowding out private investment. This can make it more difficult for businesses to obtain loans, which can limit their ability to expand and create jobs. Increased inflation. High levels of debt can also lead to inflation if the government chooses to print money to pay off its debt. This can lead to higher prices. Reduced flexibility. High levels of debt can limit the government's ability to respond to future economic downturns or crises. If the government is already heavily in debt, It may not have the resources to increase spending or reduce taxes to stimulate the economy during a recession. Burden on future generations. The national debt is essentially a burden on future generations, as they will be responsible for paying it off. If the debt continues to grow, it could result in a lower standard of living for future generations, as they will have to spend more of their income on paying off the debt. Potential default. In extreme cases, a high level of debt can lead to a default, where the government is unable to pay its creditors. This could lead to a global financial crisis, as U.S. government debt is widely held by investors around the world. Efforts to address the national debt. There have been several efforts over the years to address the national debt, but so far, none have been successful in significantly reducing it. Some of the most significant efforts include Balanced Budget Amendment. Some lawmakers have proposed a balanced budget amendment, which would require the government to balance its budget every year. However, this amendment has never been ratified. Spending cuts. Some lawmakers have called for spending cuts to reduce the deficit and the national debt. However, these efforts have often been met with resistance from interest groups and voters who do not want to see cuts to social programs. Tax increases. Some lawmakers have called for tax increases to reduce the deficit and the national debt. However, these efforts have often been met with resistance from taxpayers and business groups who do not want to see higher taxes. Economic growth. Some economists argue that economic growth is the best way to reduce the national debt. If the economy grows, tax revenues will increase, and the deficit and debt will shrink. The national debt of the United States is a significant economic issue that has been growing steadily for decades. Wars, economic downturns, social programs, tax cuts, and interest on the debt have all contributed to its growth. The national debt has several potential consequences, including reduced economic growth, increased inflation, reduced flexibility, a burden on future generations, and the potential for default. There have been several efforts to address the national debt over the years, but so far, none have been successful in significantly reducing it. As the debt continues to grow, it will be up to lawmakers and economists to find a solution that can reduce the debt without causing harm to the economy or to future generations.